Hey everyone, my name is Liam Carnahan. I'm a coach and mentor for freelancers, and I'm also a freelancer myself. I run the business Inkwell Content, where I offer SEO and content marketing services for my clients. And I'm also the co-host of Freelance Success, which is a community for freelancers. Needless to say, I spend a lot of time talking with freelancers. And whether I'm talking to a freelancer who's just started out or someone who's been freelancing for years, I'm pretty much guaranteed to at some point talk about pricing. And that's because it is one of the hardest, if not the hardest parts of figuring out freelancing. There's so many different pricing structures to choose from. How do you know which one is right? Which one's going to get you what you want? It's very confusing. It's almost like being at a buffet and there's just so many good choices or so many unfamiliar choices that you really can't decide. So since I've been freelancing for about 6 years and for half a decade before that was in content marketing agency, I have tried a lot of different pricing structures. I've landed on a few that really work for me. But what I want to do today is walk you through all of the different options and talk about the pros and cons of each one and then give you some guidance on how you can decide which of these pricing structures is right for you and your business. Okay, let's get started. So first thing I want to say is that before you even start thinking about which structure you want, you need to have three questions narrowed down in your mind. These should be rattling around in your head throughout this presentation and whenever you're choosing a pricing structure. The first question is the obvious one. Is the money worth my time? Time is money. The amount of time you spend on a project should directly correlate with exactly how much you earn. So even if you're not charging per hour, you need to have an idea of what your hourly rate would be so that you can estimate whether or not each project is going to be worth your time. The next question is, will the client see this as a good value? And that is because you're really not going to sell anything unless the client also feels like they're getting a deal. So half of the work of choosing a good pricing structure is making sure that whatever you're coming to the table with actually sounds good to the client as well. And we're going to talk about how you structure your pricing in order for that to be the case without shortchanging yourself. And the last question is, does this project or whatever it is I'm about to take on, does it bring stability and longevity to my bottom line? So when you're choosing a pricing structure, you should be thinking about, okay, is this going to make me feel more confident? Is it going to give me some long-term comfort? Is this going to help out my current situation? As freelancers, we deal with the feast and famine mindset a lot, and it's really not healthy for us. It doesn't feel good. So we're going to explore some ways that you can use pricing to get over that. Now, in order to do this, you have to know exactly how long various tasks are going to take you. And the easiest way to do that is to time yourself. You can do this with just a plain timer on your desk and a pen and note paper if you want, but it's probably easier to do it with an online tool. I used to use toggle.com, which has a free timer in there. It tracks your different projects and everything and kind of organizes the data for you. And I've now switched over to using Moxie as kind of my daily project management tool. Not advertising for them. It's just that's the one that I use now. They have a timer built in. So if you haven't already, start timing yourself. Get an average number of this is how long on average it takes me to do X, Y, and Z so that you can have that figure in your head. And then from there, it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, how much do I want to be earning? How much do I need to charge per hour in order to get there? Kind of reverse engineering your pricing. And again, this works even if you're not doing hourly pricing. This is a really good exercise. So recommend starting there. Now, when it comes to hourly rates, a lot of freelancers start here because maybe that's what they were doing before, or maybe they start out on Fiverr or Upwork or one of those platforms which default to hourly pricing. Sometimes it just seems like that makes the most sense. It's where I started as a freelancer too. I don't love it long term though. I do think it works for freelancers who are just starting out. Maybe you're trying to figure out how much things cost. You're still timing yourself. And I think it's a decent place to start, but it's not a long-term solution. And the reason is because the more efficient and faster you get as a freelancer, unless you're constantly updating your hourly rate, you're going to start shortchanging yourself. For example, it used to take me 6 to 8 weeks to do a content strategy for my clients. Now it takes me 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm about twice as fast. But if I had kept my same hourly rate, that means I'd be earning half as much as I should be earning, and that's not good. And the other alternative then is to just constantly be updating your price, which is really uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for you. It's uncomfortable for the client. It's not something we like having to do. So I don't love hourly rates. I think it's an okay place to start, but for me, it just doesn't make sense in terms of what I do. And I think for a lot of freelancers, the answer is the same. Now, The next one I want to talk about is what I call menu pricing. Maybe you haven't heard of this one before because I kind of made it up, though I'm sure other people do this. Menu pricing is a method I came up with back when I was working in content marketing agencies. And we offered a really diverse range of content because we had videographers and photographers and web developers and all those different graphic designers, everybody working on producing content. So we had a lot of different things to offer, and obviously those things cost wildly different prices. So I came up with menu pricing as a way to get around that. And the way I got around that was by coming up with a currency, quote unquote. I just called it content units and setting a price on that currency, a single price. I think back then it was $250 per unit. Now it's going to be way more because that was like 10 years ago. And I would then assign different unit costs to the different items on my menu. So a single blog article might cost 2 units, whereas a full-on video production might cost 25 units, right? It all depended on the price. And I really liked this because it was really ideal for scaling up and down with my clients. I would sell them a certain number of units as a baseline, 20, 30 units. And then if they wanted to add things on, it was very easy to say, okay, that's 4 more units, that's 3 more units. We'll just tack that on. So it's really good for scaling up and down. And here's just a quick look at what those actually look like in practice. This is actually the menu that I used to use. So you can see I've got all of my different services broken down by what's on offer. And then I've got this little unit price next to them so that clients know how much it would cost to do each of those things. And then they can adjust their units every month. So if you offer a lot of different things, you have a bunch of different services that clients might want to pick and choose from, I recommend this menu pricing option. All right, now we're getting into the good stuff. Let's talk about project pricing. This is when you charge a single flat fee for a project or for a set amount of time, maybe like a day rate. And this is kind of the advanced where a lot of freelancers end up after they figure out that hourly pricing isn't going to work for them. It's still personally one of my favorite ways to charge. I have projects every month. I enjoy the one-off fee. It's a nice way to get things done. And it's really good for these short-term projects that you know aren't going to last very long. And also, if you have a project you're not too sure about, maybe you aren't sure you're going to want to do it long-term, or you're not sure you want to work with this client long-term, having a project based means you can walk away from it when the project is over and you don't have to worry about signing your name up for something that you don't want to do. Now, in order for this to work, you do have to have a good understanding of the scope of the project, and you have to be really, really clear with your client about the scope of the project. I mean, bullet points explaining, this is how many hours of my time you get every month. This is how much onboarding I'll be doing. This is how many emails you can expect from me. This is how many calls we're going to have. Lay it all out, because clients tend to ask for more and more over time. That's called scope creep. And eventually you end up doing hours of work that you didn't plan on doing, you didn't budget for. So having this scope laid out really clearly is really good. And then you have to be very good at saying to your client, I'd be happy to do that for you, but it's not in the current scope. So we're going to have to add X amount of money onto the project price. That's just a good phrase to have in your back pocket for when scope creep happens. The other thing that you want to do with project pricing is make sure that you have an upsell in the back of your mind before you start the project. So this is because a project is over when it's over, and that's not a really good way to add a lot of stability to your income. So what I like to do is have an idea in the back of my mind of, okay, when this project is over, how am I going to offer something to the client to extend it, to keep them in my books? For example, when I do content training, I'll go into a business and I'll train a group of their writers or their content marketing people and give them some SEO training. And then usually that project is over after a few lessons. But what I will often say at the end is to my contact lead, okay, now that this project is over, I'd like to offer you the chance to work with me on an ongoing basis. We can have one call a month. I'll review the work that your group is doing, make sure that all the lessons that we just went over is sticking. And that way I can extend that contract. I don't just lose the income after it's over. Speaking of retainers, let's get into that, because that is truly one of my all-time favorite ways of working with clients and pricing. A retainer, if you don't know, is basically when you agree to a set price, usually per month, and a client pays that for a set amount of time or endlessly until the contract ends. And the reason we all love retainers is because it really gives you that stability. It gives you the ability to forecast your income. Again, feast and famine, not good. With a retainer, you know exactly how much you're going to be earning for the next few months, so that you can do a little bit of planning. You can do a little bit of financial planning ahead of time. You're not just wondering when the next project is going to come in. And it also means you don't have to be out there hunting for new projects all the time, because you have that baseline income. But that being said, retainers are coveted and wanted because they're often very hard to get. It takes a lot of trust building with the client. It takes a lot of work up front to make sure the client is going to actually honor their end of the agreement. And it takes a lot of work from you to make sure you're going to honor the end of the agreement. Retainers become your world. They become something that's very important to you. So you end up putting a lot of work in them, a lot of time into them. You want to make sure that you're able to keep up with all of that and everything else you have going on. So there is a downside to retainers. They can be risky. In terms of making sure the client trusts you and understands what you're trying to do, it's a really wise idea to break down the pricing. I'm going to show you what that looks like in a minute, but there's a couple different ways you can break it down, either by explaining all of your different services and putting a price tag next to each one, or giving them different payment plans. But what I like to do is make sure that I'm not just throwing a big number at them. Oh, this is going to be an $8,000 retainer. But instead I'm saying it's an $8,000 retainer, but keyword research every month costs $1,000, and, client management stuff goes $500 and all of this stuff, so that they see exactly why I'm charging that number and they're a little more comfortable paying that number. And I also recommend that if you do get a retainer, you definitely want to build in a cancellation policy so that they don't just cut and run and you're suddenly without money. For me, it's pretty simple, 30 days notice. That way I have at least 30 days to either convince them not to cancel, convince them to reduce instead of canceling, or just find some income to replace them. I'm not just left out to dry. And in addition to that, highly recommend every 6 months or even every quarter, you have a meeting with your client contact to sit down with them, review the terms of the retainer, see if there's anything they want to add, opportunity for upsell, or if there's anything that they're unhappy about. You don't want them just to be stewing silently and paying your invoice every month and then blow up at you. So make sure you have these scheduled meetings where, I usually call them a strategy meeting, where we talk about the strategy, yes, but then we also talk about the retainer and the parameters of the retainer. Real quick, here's just a couple examples of what some of my pricing structures look like when I do retainers. This one here, you can see I sort of have all of my service descriptions written out in detail with the price next to each one. So that's what I mean by breaking it down. I even have things like onboarding process here. Charge for everything. I always charge for everything. Don't do free work. That's not what the free means in Freelancer. And this document's a lot longer. You can't see all the other stuff I tucked into this. Over here, a bit more simple. I find that giving clients a opportunity to make a choice just really helps them feel better about the situation. If they feel like they have some agency, they have the ability to choose a different package, that's really going to help you get it across the line. So for this client, for example, I just offered them 2 different pricing packages, one where they paid for the big strategy fee in the first month and then had a lower monthly fee, one where it was an even monthly fee for the whole 6 months. Really easy stuff to break down. All right, the last pricing structure I want to talk about is what I'm calling big bang pricing. And this is really new to me. I've really only been doing this for about a year. It's very much an ongoing experiment. And when I talk about big bang pricing, I'm basically talking about big projects. So unlike project pricing, which is usually a few $1,000s, these are upwards of 8 to 15K for me at the moment. And these are really big projects that are only going to last a certain amount of time, but I really get embedded in them. I really dig deep in them, and I get paid really well for the project. Now, when it comes to big bang pricing, I will say it's awesome when they come in. So at the end of last year, I had 2 or 3 of these come in at once. I was doing a happy dance. It was really good. I felt on top of the world. But now it's been a few months. I haven't had another one yet, and I'm getting a little nervous. Now, I'll talk about why I'm not terribly nervous in a few minutes here. But it is something that I would recommend for more experienced freelancers who already have some income coming in, and freelancers who just, have the ability to sit with the discomfort of not knowing when your next project is coming in. That's really who this is for in my experience. One thing I'm loving about these big projects is that I think you'll find if you get into retainers a lot, eventually, you get bored of doing the same stuff for a client over the course of 3 or 4 years, as some of my retainers have lasted. Maybe you're running out of ideas of what to do that's new and fresh. It just kind of leads to burnout because you get bored with it. This does not happen with a big bang project because it's all new. It's short term. You get really deep into it. It's a really good way to break up the monotony, I find. And, the risk of it, of not knowing when things come in, it actually, when they do come in, it brings a really nice benefit. I call it time freedom. And it gives you financial cushion to use your time differently. So for example, Like I said, at the end of last year, I had several big bang projects come in. I was really set financially. I decided to take January and February off. I went to Costa Rica. I worked on my memoir, and I wasn't panicking because I had the financial cushion from the previous time in order to do that. I still kept a couple of my retainer clients going, little projects here and there, just to make myself feel better. But I took a lot of time off, more time off than I've taken in 6 years. And it was definitely worth it. It was definitely worth it. Okay, so those are the pricing structures that I've used in the past that you can choose from. But what I want to accentuate before we wrap up is that you don't have to choose one. You can be like me and choose several different pricing structures based on what you want to achieve, what's comfortable for you, and the client you're going after. You don't have to just be an hourly contractor or somebody who only works in project pricing. You can jump back and forth. You can be agile. For me, the sweet spot is that I have my retainers, which give me that baseline income. So I know I can always pay my rent. I know I can always, hit my financial goals because I have that baseline income. And then I use projects to elevate my income above where I want it to be, get some money into my savings, that kind of stuff. All the extra money that I need comes from these little projects. And then finally, I have my big bangs for funding my retirement, for taking sabbaticals, and just bringing myself into that next level of income that I'd like to be at. For me, having these three, that's perfect. Some people might want to add one or take one out, but I recommend that you don't lock yourself into one. You can jump around. If you're going to do that, though, you need to have a little bit of planning because it's a lot of work to have all these different pricing structures. You need to be organized about it and practice what I call Frankenstein pricing. And this is basically making sure that, first of all, you know what your services are, you have a list of services that you offer, and you have an hourly rate for each one. This is just for you. So okay, it takes me a certain number of hours to do this, and I want to earn that much money, so I'm going to charge this much per item, how many hours it would take, whatever. Just have a really good layout of each of your services, of exactly what it costs in time and money. Then you want to create templates out of these. So you want to make these general descriptions like I had on that previous screen, write up in a really nice way for the client what it entails, all the benefits that they get from it, and the general price attached to it. You don't have to settle on an exact price if you don't want to, but just a general price and a price description, a description of your service rather. And then finally, when it comes time to make a pitch, you Frankenstein them together. So maybe you take, different services and align them so that it's a big, nice project. Maybe you take a piece from your hourly rates for one part of the project, and then you add in a per project price. But basically, you grab little different parts and pieces of it and put together a beautiful monster for your client. All right, everybody, that's all I have to say about pricing for now. Once again, my name is Liam Carnahan, and if you want to learn more about pricing or run through some of your ideas around pricing or just talk freelancing in general, I would love to hear from you. Have a wonderful day and happy pricing.